Hello, I'm Grant Bartley from Philosophy Now magazine. You're listening to the Philosophy Now radio show on Resonance. Today we'll be talking about Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, 1770 to 1831, who's a German philosopher of the 18th century with some fairly mind-blowing ideas. I would say that he's, like all good philosopher, he's crossed the line between madness and genius, but is still sane enough to write down his ideas, but only just. Okay, I have with me Caterina Deli Giorgi from the University of Sussex, and Peter Benson, a frequent contributor to Philosophy Now magazine, particularly on Hegel. Rosanella and Alan will be providing live music. So first question, guys, who is Hegel and why is he relevant or important? Peter, do you want to start us off with who Hegel was?
Yeah, well, as Grant said, Hegel was born in 1770. Now, to put that in context, that's the same year that William Wordsworth was born.
Okay.
So both of them were 19 at the time of the French Revolution.
Yeah, that's significant for Hegel, isn't it?
Both of them reacted very enthusiastically to this, as so many people did around Europe. Wordsworth, of course, said that it was a bliss it was in that dawn to be alive, and to be young was very heaven. And both of them were young and excited by this. As time went on, of course, the revolution turned into the terror, this appalling period of destruction and death. And Hegel was very upset by this and very aware of this change and the subsequent change when the new government that had been set up in France was replaced by the dictatorship of Napoleon.
Okay.
And I think seeing that as the historical background gives some idea of his sense of history and the importance of history and historical change.
Because he was a philosopher of history, wasn't he?
He was a philosopher of history. In terms of the history of philosophy, the major influence at the time that Hegel was growing up was Kant.
Okay.
And this said Kant had produced an enormous philosophical system which had fascinated people, and at the same time, of course, everybody came along afterwards felt in rivalry with this, that they wanted to go beyond Kant. But there was an assumption that what a philosopher would do would be to produce a system. Now, the various people who came along, Hegel was the one who perhaps produced the most extravagant of systems.
Yeah, it was a complete
which was
cathedral to himself.
A cathedral, exactly, yeah. An enormous construction. And this was to replace Kant's system and to go beyond Kant's system and to resolve some of the problems that he considered, within Kant's system.
Okay. Katerina, why is he relevant to us listening?
I was thinking about this idea and of relevance, and three contradictory views came to mind, and the systematicity of Hegel, if we have a chance to develop a little bit further, perhaps accounts for why contradictory ideas can claim Hegelian ancestry. Yeah. Well, the first one is the kind of conservatism that was rather unhappily named the big society. Now,
so you're saying basically that Hegel is now let me stop. He's the beginning of a lot of historical ideas, such as the big society. That's what you're saying.
Let me explain a bit. I'm saying that there is a localism and a conservatism, an idea of being at home in the world, of belonging, of cohesion. The Hegelian term is ethical community, or Sittlichkeit, and there is an English philosopher, Michael Oakeshott, who can be thought of as sort of middle point, let's say, between Hegel and big society. And against this, another thought that people may associate with Hegel is Francis Fukuyama's notorious End of History.
Okay.
And that was much derided because of its rashness and triumphalism. But again,
that's Fukuyama's book you're talking about.
That is Fukuyama's notion of End of History, but it is not fanciful to see an ancestry of that idea in Hegel, and the core thought there would be that once something like a political arrangement in which we have universal rights and respect for individuals is on the cards, it's very difficult to go back unless you start retrenching and delimiting the scope for freedom. And the third idea, yet to alienate the parts of the audience that are not already alienated, is of course Marxism, because there is there are important continuities. Not just Marx is not just a critic of Hegel. There are important continuities in their thought. And one idea I want to get across is the thought of contradiction. For Marx as well as for Hegel, contradiction is just a logical misdeed. There is something that people can experience, and something that struck me listening to the radio today about the capping of the proposal for capping benefits in order for people to get out of work is a contradiction that lots of people might experience. On the one hand, they say, okay, if there are no jobs, get on your bike, mobility, you should embrace mobility, you should go out and do things. On the other hand, we have duties to our families, our children, our immediate society, and therefore stability is our duty. And this is a contradiction faced by lots of people.
The contradiction is between what, movement and stability?
Or other contradictions that you can experience, but this is just an example from today's news. But what both Marx and Hegel saw was that contradictions do not just a logical problem, it's something that people can experience in their daily lives. And what they sought in different ways in their philosophy is to find a way to overcome contradiction.
Okay, well that's quite a lot. I don't think we'll be able to cover all of that, but I think we're going to start with the...
If I can take up the question about Marx as well, and what Marx took from Hegel. Marx actually says somewhere that his entire philosophy is just an elaboration of about 10 pages in The Philosophy of Right,
which is Hegel's book of jurisprudence,
moral and political philosophy.
Okay.
And the section that Marx took up is the section on civil society, and about the dialectic, the conflict between capital and labour. And this was elaborated, as we know, as the basis of Marx's philosophy. Now, in Hegel, he takes exactly that same position, that there's this conflict between the wishes of labour and the wishes of capital, but he comes to the conclusion that this is a conflict that can't be resolved at that level, that a different level has to come in, and that level is the level of the state. So that the only way for this to be resolved is for decisions to be made at the level of the state, which will produce harmony between these conflicting forces. This, of course, is what Marx rejected. But I think if we look at the world today, we can see how Hegel's comments on this are relevant to the problems that we face.
Does that tie in with what you were saying about Hegel's influences?
Absolutely. But what I find an interesting question is not just the solutions one might try to find in Hegel, but why there's, from on the one hand, conservatism and localism and communitarianism, on the other hand, aggressive neoliberalism, and then Marxism can all find somehow their home in Hegel. And I think this is...
they all claim their roots in Hegel, don't they?
But how come, contradictory positions? Because you could say, either the guy is just super intelligent,
so let's stop there. So how come all these people, the conservatives, the neoliberals and the communists, how do they all say, we trace our thinking back to Hegel? How is that possible?
They may not all say it, so I didn't want to get across the idea that they all actually say it, but that it can reasonably and plausibly be traced, yes. Well, I think basically there are two issues. One is that Hegel is a systematic thinker, as was said at the start, and it's very easy for people to have cafeteria-style Hegel and pick the bits they like. But the other issue is that Hegel is a complex thinker, and that's different to say that than saying that he's obscure, which he also is, of course, notoriously. But he's a complicated thinker. He tries to get across, and maybe he fails, a complex idea.
Okay, what is the complex? What is the heart of his thinking then? Does anybody want to just go straight to the heart of what he thinks?
I can have a go.
Yeah, go on then.
Okay. It's something that sounds very simple and it's slogan-like, but it is enormously complicated to unpack.
Start with the slogan,
Okay, the slogan is, philosophy is its own time comprehended or taken up in thought. Now, that's simple, and can be a very trivial thought that we are all children of our time and we attend to things that are present to hand. But then, what does it mean for this historical moment to be reconciled or thought together with the idea of things being taken up in thought, comprehended? This idea of a realm that is outside time.
Okay.
And there is one way that some people understand Hegel taken up means understanding these contradictions and showing them, and therefore the philosopher is critical. He shows up, what is the matter, that is, what is the problems of society, like a Socratic gadfly. And there is another view, more quietistic view, that sees Hegel as being as the philosopher who says, look, the world is all right. There is nothing the matter with the world. What is the matter is your own misprisions, the fantasies you have about fulfillment and the like.
Okay, Peter, what about you? What would you say is the sort of core of Hegel?
Well, I think to carry on from those positions about history, this is also one of the differences with Marx, that this comprehension of time takes place in relation to the past. There's no prediction of what's going to happen in the future in Hegel. It's only when we look backwards that we can understand what it is that has brought us to this position.
Okay.
This is why
But what is the position that we've been brought to?
The position that we're in now, which is what we can call
what is
the
it
end of
according to
history.
Hegel? It's the end of history, which is...
But the point is, it's not an end where nothing else happens.
Yes.
But we are always at the end of history, because history has brought us to this position.
It's not going to evolve anymore.
No, it doesn't say that at all. No, that's what subsequent people have said. You see, Francis Fukuyama took his ideas mainly from Alexander G.W.F, who gave a series of lectures about Hegel in the 1930s in Paris.
I probably got them wrong.
Which was hugely influential on French philosophy at the time, particularly because there was no translations of Hegel available at the time.
Right.
And this is it's an eccentric interpretation of Hegel. It's an interesting interpretation, but it is an eccentric interpretation. If you look at Hegel himself, there's no notion of history having come to an end, or in any way imminently going to come to an end.
Okay, so he says, what about history then?
He says that in looking backwards, we can see this pattern of history. And when we do see that, there's a famous quotation that when philosophy paints its grey on grey, then has a form of life grown old. The owl of Minerva spreads its wings only at dusk.
Now, I don't know what that means, but anyway.
What it means is that philosophy comes after the events have happened.
Right, okay.
History evolves without people thinking very much about what's happening. And then the philosopher comes along with an ability to understand it.
Okay, I think we're going to go to a song now, but after the song we'll be talking about what Hegel's theory of history is. So Alan, you're going to lead us into a song. What's this song going to be called?
Well, I think actually, in view of the fact that we're talking about time related things, or things relating to time, we'll do a song called Time Waits for No One.
Okay.
Except me while I'm tuning up.
Yeah, we're all waiting for you now.
Yeah, well, still over here. Anyway, here we go. For no one, baby blue. It don't wait for me. It don't wait for you. It don't wait for your skin. It don't wait for your hair. Time's got no patience. It really don't care. You're pushing it till it's all work, it's no play. You know it's gonna take some time. Just remember, time's the bottom line. Every minute, every day, the time's gonna make you pay. And a moment in a week, you ain't got time to speak. And a moment in a week, you ain't got time to speak, 'cause time waits for no one, baby blue. Time waits for no one, baby blue. Like a hurricane blowing, time's after you. Don't wait for the sun, and don't wait for the rain. Time's got no patience, it's here to bring you pain. And if you're thinking of taking a moment just to try and work things out, just remember, time's got the cloud. So sail down the river, let your feelings flow. Sail down the river, let it go. Just love every moment, feel every thrill. 'Cause time is ticking, it won't stay still. Time waits for no one, baby blue. Like a sprinter on a racetrack, time's timing you. From the starter's gun to the final straight, time's moving you on, you can't be late. Every minute, every day, the time's gonna make you pay. At a moment in the week, you ain't got time to speak. At an hour in the month, you're gonna feel the crunch. 'Cause time waits for no one, baby blue. Time waits for no one, baby blue.
Thanks, Alan. We'll give details of his website later for people who like that song. I'm Grant Bartley from Philosophy Now magazine. We're the Philosophy Now radio show. We're talking about Hegel and a German philosopher of history from the 18th century. I have with me Caterina Deli Giorgi and Peter Benson. And I just want to straight away get into some of Hegel's ideas are, particularly starting with his idea of history. What is Hegel's idea of the meaning of history, or what is the aim or purpose of history to Hegel, and therefore the meaning of life? Just to start us off.
Oh, that's
the purpose.
big.
The purpose
Okay.
of history to Hegel.
I think Hegel is a philosopher of whom we can ask what's the purpose of history is, actually. And although Peter very nicely presented earlier the retrospective character of philosophical understanding,
right,
I do think that Hegel is committed to progress in history.
Sure.
The difficulty is how we capture that progress.
Sure.
And there are some people who think that Hegel is committed to some sort of supra-individual entity, something like spirit, trudging through history, realizing itself.
He does use the word spirit,
He does,
doesn't he?
indeed. But spirit is another of these mysterious words that requires quite a lot of interpretation, because it could be just us here now speaking and trying to understand our problems, our life, our relation to society, our relation to our hopes and actions, etc.
Can we sort of skip the problems and just get to the ideas?
Okay. One easy way of capturing Hegel's progressive view of history is in another slogan that he himself gives you when he looks at empires, ancient empires. He says, then one was free.
Yeah.
Then he looks at the Athenian city-state. Then he says, few are free.
Right.
And he believes that in the modern world, all are free or potentially free.
So it's history is a development of freedom. I've got a quote here from he says in the Phenomenology of Spirit, the history of the world is none other than the progress of the consciousness of freedom. What's your response to that, Peter?
I think one of the important things in what Katerina's just said is that progression from a world in which only one person is free to a world in which some people are free to a world in which all people are free.
That's how he perceived it. But
that's how he perceived it. But the interesting thing there, of course, is there's 3 stages. And this is one of the central things about Hegel, that everything proceeds in 3 stages.
Sure.
This is what's called the dialectic. And it's one of the things that people have probably heard about in relation to Hegel. It's often misunderstood because it's frequently described in terms of a process of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis.
Right.
These are words that Hegel himself never used.
Oh, didn't he?
These are terms that were introduced by one of his followers later, and people thought, I can understand that, so they latched onto that and didn't bother trying to understand further. To try and give a better idea, I'm going to pinch some ideas from Slavoj Žižek, who's a contemporary Hegelian philosopher, who gave a very good example of what the dialectic is, and he did it by taking a quotation from a film, which is Christopher Nolan's film The Prestige, from 2006, which many people have probably seen. It's a film about a rivalry between 2 magicians.
No, you don't.
And the assistant to one of the magicians is played by Michael Caine.
Right.
And he has a theory of what magic is.
Right.
And Michael Caine gives this speech of what every magic trick contains 3 stages.
Right.
I'm not going to do the voice. I'm not going to do my impersonation of Michael Caine. What he says is this: every magic trick consists of 3 parts or acts. The first part is called the pledge. A magician shows you something ordinary, a deck of cards, a bird or a man. He shows you this object. Perhaps he asks you to inspect it to see that it is indeed real, unaltered, normal. But of course it probably isn't. The second act is called the turn. The magician takes the ordinary something and makes it do something extraordinary. Now you're looking for the secret. You won't find it because, of course, you're not really looking. You don't really want to know. You want to be fooled. But you won't clap yet because making something disappear isn't enough. You have to bring it back. That's why every magic trick has a third act, the hardest part, the part we call the prestige.
Okay.
This is Hegelian philosophy in a nutshell. The pledge, the turn, and the prestige. The 3 steps of the dialectic.
That's how he thinks things progress through these 3 stages.
What happens in the film is that a small bird is made to disappear. The bird disappearing is the turn, and then it's made to reappear, which is the prestige.
Right.
But the process of making the bird disappear is, in fact, killing the bird. Although the audience don't see that, the bird has been killed in the process of making it disappear, and what reappears is another bird. Okay. So what happens afterwards, what happens with the prestige, doesn't bring back the dead bird. History doesn't resolve the past, it takes it to a different stage.
Okay, look, so we've got this idea that this Hegelian logic works in a certain way, and it's worked on history to start off with one person, the tyrant, being free, and then some people being free in sort of, say, Athenian democracy, and then in Hegel's time, because he thought he was at the accumulation of history, that everybody is free.
Can I come in?
Yeah, sure.
That? Because I don't want Hegel to come across as only as sort of having this Pollyannish view of history.
Right.
It's all jolly good fun towards, there is a Whiggish interpretation of Hegel. On the other hand, he's quite unsparing about the degree of atrocity we can inflict on one another. And he calls he calls history the slaughter bench of history. So he's not Deweyite, nor does he think there is some sort of Leibnizian harmonious universe or theodicy where everything gets redeemed in the end.
Sure,
but this is why the original bird is dead, and it's only another bird that can come along.
Yes, but that's why I think perhaps the Žižek thing is more about Žižek than about Hegel.
Everything in Žižek is about Žižek. But I mean, the point is, he's saying that history is a progress towards freedom, right? I mean, is that historically accurate for a start? And if it is, what is this freedom which we're supposed to be progressing towards? What is it?
Well, the way I see it is there is a certain conception of freedom as a right that emerges historically at a certain time, and and a certain place in history. But it's, the European Enlightenment, the idea that we are free, that we should be self-determining, that we should not just cleave to tradition and what is given and what is accepted.
That's what came out through the French Revolution,
Let's say yes.
The Declaration of Human Rights.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there is a philosophical conceptualization of this through different people, but key for Hegel is Kant, right?
Right, but I don't think Hegel's view is that view of history of freedom.
But exactly, he thinks that this kind of freedom, whilst very valuable, at the same time separates us out of lots of valuable and important resources.
So we're talking about
support, etc.
He's not just into freedom as self-determination and autonomy.
He calls this arbitrariness. In the philosophy of right, the term he uses, which can be translated as free choice, is usually translated in the Hegelian context as arbitrariness, because it is the thought, I can do whatever I like. And this he considers a very destructive view of freedom. And the problem is how you can reconcile what is emancipatory and exciting about this idea of freedom with all sorts of other things we need, such as fulfillment, for instance, in our daily lives, and social structures in which we can recognize ourselves. We don't just have a negative relation towards them. And this is the potentially conservative side of Hegel, where he thinks that freedom should be understood more like a fit between the subject and the object.
The chimeric or the chameleon-like nature of Hegel's thing possibly boils down to there's lots of different ways you can read what he's saying about what freedom is. I mean, he does bring the state in there. I mean, do you want to say anything about Hegel's view of freedom in relation to history, Peter?
As you say, I think the state is, it's only within the state that freedom can be achieved.
Why does he think that, though?
Because precisely of these conflicts that exist within civil society, that is to say, society at a level below the state, which can only be solved or mediated by a higher level, which is the level of the state. So
you need some higher authority to tell you what to do, and then you can be free.
It's not a question of telling you what to do, it's a question of mediating between the various conflicting parties.
Right, okay. All right, okay, so why did Hegel think that the state in his contemporary Prussia was the end point of history?
Well, it is questionable whether he in fact thought that. I think Peter explained really well that when Hegel speaks about end of history, should be understood either in terms of wherever each philosopher stands looking back.
So there isn't any end of history.
Or
really.
you can understand it, or you can understand the way I try to present as a progressive realization or conceptualization of freedom. So whichever way you understand it, you cannot have the Prussian state as the peak.
Why did he think that his state in his time was the sort of the manifestation of free, or the vehicle of freedom, which couldn't get any better than then? You know, you couldn't evolve the state beyond that point. Why did he think that?
I don't think he did think that. I don't. As Katrina was saying, I think he doesn't suggest that history has come to an end. Interestingly enough, there was an American academic who wrote a sequel to the Phenomenology of Spirit called The Owl at Dawn, in which he carried on talking about subsequent historical events since the death of Hegel, and saw those also evolving in the same dialectical process. And there's no reason why that should be contradictory with what Hegel said.
There is an element of acceptance and of encouraging us to accept, or at least take seriously, give their due weight to the institutions and the structures that surround us.
Right.
And this is what can push what I described earlier as the more quietistic life, where you leave the world as it is. And what you try to reconfigure is your hopes, your ideas, your intentions about fulfillment, etc. And this is why, for example, the phenomenology, one of his most famous and better read books, I think, don't you think, is so popular because it is full of characters, shapes of consciousness, but they're really like characters called unhappy consciousness or master-slave dialectic, and it's all about this struggle. One shape has an idea or a hope or an aspiration or a belief, and then it turns out that it just does not fit with what they are capable of achieving or what they in fact hold in their hand, and this is what gets the dialectic going in the book. Well, it's a page turn.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a page turn. Well, I wouldn't recommend anybody to try reading it. It is extraordinarily dense. It is, as Katrina says, one of the most widely read of his books. But in fact, it was intended as an introduction to his system. Okay. Not an introduction in the sense of being simplification.
The phenomenology of spirit.
The phenomenology of spirit. It was starting, as it does start, with just ordinary everyday perceptions, ordinary everyday life, and then seeing how developing the contradictions within that, seeing how trying to get a clearer and clearer position on this leads one further and further on until at the end of the book you arrive at what he calls absolute knowledge, which will sound like an extraordinary thing to be offered.
Okay. We're going to talk about absolute knowledge and all that business after the next song. And now we got Rosanella to play. What's the name of your song, Rosanella?
It's called Look at Them There. Look at them there.
Look at them there.
And it's what I call my bus song. In fact, I was on the 74 bus on that day, not feeling in very good mood.
Okay.
Because, I'd listened to the radio and we watched the TV. At that time, I still watched the TV, and there was bad news all over the place. And then as I was sitting down, I see a poster that says, "Smile, you're on camera." So between politics and smiley faces, this song came about. Look at them there, they're coming and going with the money. Look at them there, it's been scary, now there is getting worse, and nobody cares. Something is gonna give, I wonder what that will be. Something is gonna give, I wonder what that will be. Will the new monarchs be coming in a new religion with these crusaders here? The anarchists can't help, they haven't got a clue, they don't know what to do. The generations that fell, the free don't dip back out in the weapon rules. Someone must be watching this, plotting the master plan. Someone must be watching this, plotting the master plan. Is anybody there? Does anybody care? Are you listening there? 'Cause I'm as lost as you could be. What will it be? What will I see? Is anybody there? Does anybody care? Are you listening there? 'Cause I'm as lost as you could be. Look at them there, they put up cameras everywhere, everywhere. Dark-looking glasses scrutinizing me and you. while we hide behind the truth. They say it is all for my safety, but for what I can see, it's taking you away from me. How did it all get started? Freedom was abused, so now they've got the excuse, and we are weaved into history. And now we're weaved into history. What will it be, my son? What will it be, my angel? I thought I brought you in the world of eternity, but for what I can see is the one we're gonna be. What will you be, my son? What will you be, my angel? I thought I brought you in the world of eternity, but for what I can see is the one we're gonna be. Is anybody there? Does anybody care? Are you listening there? 'Cause I'm as lost as you could be. Dun 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 dun. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rosanella.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm Grant Bartley. You're listening to the Philosophy Now radio show. We're talking about Hegel. I've got here Katerina Deli Georgi and Peter Benson. Coming back to what you were saying before the song there. Hegel's got this idea that human history is evolving to a state of absolute knowledge. Do you want to say something about what this state of absolute knowledge is?
Well, the final chapter of the Phenomenology of Spirit is called Absolute Knowledge.
Right.
It's very short, and in fact doesn't contain a great deal that's particularly illuminating. Anybody who just turned to that chapter thinking that they could skip the preliminaries wouldn't get a great deal from it. What he doesn't mean is that you then know everything. He doesn't mean that you could then go on Mastermind and answer questions and everything at all. What he means is that there's a position from which you can now understand the whole of everything. And the Phenomenology of Spirit is a slow progression towards that position, the Calvary of the Spirit, as he calls it. So at the end of this Calvary of the Spirit, you've arrived at the top of the mountain, and now you can turn around and re-describe it from that position, which is what he does in his later work, which is the system itself, described from the highest point.
Oh, can I take off from here? Because that's very helpful, even though having written my PhD on the Absolute, I was very keen, I remember.
Sorry, the Absolute being what?
Well, exactly, that's the question, whether it is a thing
but
or
how
whether
does
it
he
is
use,
a way
what does he
of
mean
thing.
by the word, right?
Well, the best thing is to take it over from where exactly Peter left us, at the threshold of the logic, the science of logic, or, as Hegel said, the thoughts of God before creation, which sounds hugely arrogant, because...
Right. So why is he talking about the thoughts of God before creation?
Precisely,
Where does that come in?
Why? Where does that come in?
That's what he thinks logic is. That's Hegel's notion of logic.
It's his idea is it's a basic metaphysics, and it's an attempt to give an account of what there is, all the basic stuff that there is in the world, and how we relate to it.
Right.
Now, it combines certain traditional metaphysical concerns about what there is in the world, but at the same time, it takes stock of Kant's criticism of traditional metaphysics. And this is very tricky because
You're talking about the Phenomenology of Spirit now, yeah?
I'm talking about the logic.
The logic, okay. This is another of Hegel's books.
And the key, one way of looking at the logic and one way of looking at Hegel's metaphysics is as a conjunction of two ideas.
Right.
One is that the very, very basic concepts which describe reality have to have infinite generality. Just to give an example, let's say the concept of cause. You could say, why can't I pick it up from looking at the world? Let's say I throw this book on the floor. Why can't I understand cause like that? Well, because this is just one causal episode. If I want to use it for other causal episodes, I wouldn't be able to. So this is the thought of just infinite generality. And if you have infinite generality, you don't want, at the same time, these ideas to be just private hunches, fantasies of a thinker.
Sorry, you lost me a bit.
Okay.
What is the infinite generality
it is precisely
about?
that you can apply it to other things. You have to
You
be
can
able to
apply
apply
what
the
to
concept, the basic.
So you're saying that he's saying that you can't really say anything because anything you say is applicable to everything.
No, only these very basic concepts have to have this generality.
Like cause.
Like cause, like quantity, quality. They are very basic concepts. But at the same time, these concepts are not sort of dreamt up in the thought of a thinker. They have to be organized in a certain way.
Right.
And the way in which they are organized and the way in which they have certain implications and the way they relate to other concepts creates this organization. So, and that stops them from being just arbitrary things that I think up in my bedroom or Hegel.
So you're saying that there's a sort of necessary to Hegel. There's a necessary way in which thoughts must be organised.
Excellent,
right?
Absolutely. And this is what captures his basic claim that these are thoughts that shape reality.
Okay.
Yeah. So
because they're necessary.
Because they're necessary and they're organized in this way. So if you have, you can start to get to this idea if you have, on the one hand, the thought of this infinite generality. So these are very general things.
Okay.
And if you have the thought of this organization, that they have to be organized in order to mean at all, to do the job we ask of them.
Can I ask the question then? If that's the case, then is this absolute knowledge to which human society is supposedly developing through its developing concepts of freedom, is that absolute knowledge this knowledge of the way things should be organised in a purely logical way? Is this where he's trying to get to say, we're evolving to a state where we know the state of the mind of God before the creation of the world in all its major parts?
My quick answer is no. So Peter, please.
Oh, I would think yes.
Okay.
And I think it isn't a question of the way things should be organised. It's a question of the way things are organised.
Right. So everything's necessary to Hegel.
Everything's necessary, and reality and thought are of the same nature. So the organisation of thought and the organisation of reality both have the same form.
Okay, that's an interesting thing about Hegel. He was what they call an idealist, which means that he, depending on how you interpret Hegel, it means that basically that mind is the ultimate reality, I suppose, is the most general way of putting it. But what does that mean to you two people to say that, the ultimate reality is what he calls Geist in German, which can be translated mind, idea, spirit, and all those sort of connotations. What does it mean to you?
Well, as an idealist, perhaps one should make absolutely clear that he is not an idealist in the manner of Berkeley, for instance.
Okay, which is that everything is in the mind in the way that everything you perceive is in the mind.
He is very much a realist about all sorts of things. He's a realist about ordinary objects. He's a realist about ideas. He is too much of a realist, if you will.
So where does this Geist thing come in then?
Well, the Geist is one of those tricky concepts, and one very powerful interpretation, though of course contested like all interpretations, is that Geist is the way in which we give meaning and we use concepts and we interact with the world, and this way of giving meaning and using concepts is not subjective in a privative way, because there is nothing else except for that. So Geist or spirit, according to this interpretation, is just us folk, basically.
It's people all together. It's like culture then,
people,
perhaps.
plus their cultures, plus their institutions, their ideas, etc. But there are, of course, other interpretations.
Okay, well, I'm going to ask Peter what his interpretation is.
I think Peter would be on the
do you
other
agree
side.
with that?
Well, not necessarily. I think Geist is always used in relation to human thought and human society.
In Hegel's work.
In Hegel, yeah.
What does he mean by it, according to you?
What does he mean by Geist? I think that it's important that it's not just the individual human being. It is a thought as it's embodied in society, and then it becomes embodied in the various creations of society, including such things as art and religion. So he has, as well as the development of social forms, he also has the development of religions, which go through a series of different stages, finally arriving at the absolute religion, which is Christianity.
And this is again part of his development of history, isn't it?
Very much so, yeah.
How does it tie in with his freedom stuff?
Well, Christianity is the ultimate religion for him, and the three, and particularly in its form as a religion of Trinitarianism, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. The Holy Ghost, of course, meaning the Holy Spirit, meaning Geist.
Okay.
And his interpretation of the life of Christ is that with the death of Christ, the Spirit of Christ is revived, is resurrected within his followers.
Okay.
So it's not a resurrection of the body, it's a resurrection of the Spirit of Christ within his followers, and this Spirit is the Holy Spirit, which is Geist embodied in the world of human beings.
Right, because that's how he thinks of this Spirit, as a sort of, it's like a zeitgeist or a cultural, so it's sort of the spirit of the culture, isn't it?
Yes, although this can also lead to a misunderstanding and a caricature of especially, for instance, in aesthetics and in history of art, since you mentioned other areas in which he wrote, his thought had been taken up by people who thought that every shape or every period in art history is shapes not just the high art and the artworks we see, but even the hem of a skirt, even the shape of a shoe, and that creates a rather weird notion of Geist as this, as I said earlier, supra-individual entity that somehow shapes everything and manifests everything, and this requires quite a lot of metaphysical investment to pick up. So I would rather look at his view of art as well, again, it's a very developmental view of art, and he considers our era to be a very long era in which effectively we cannot anymore either have the art of the past, like the classical art, nor can art have the place it had in the past. And the point of this is that we do not depict heroes, kings, and gods.
No.
We just depict each other. Or express our sorrows and hopes, etc.
And that's sort of representing the high degree of freedom that we've achieved.
But also diminishes art at the same time, because it is just us. There is nothing. So if you seek something higher, you have to go to philosophy, for example.
Art is replaced by philosophy, so it's replaced to Hegel. And so we're dealing in the world of the concepts, and many people have connected this with the development of conceptual art in modern times.
Really? From Hegel. So not only is he a father of the left and the right wing in politics, he's also the father of modern art.
Father of contemporary art, yes.
He's been a busy boy, hasn't he? Is this Geist, is it God in the way that we would understand the word God, or is it something else?
I would say no, although there are very fascinating mystical interpretations of Hegel, and he was interested in mysticism himself. So this is why he's just large enough to encompass multitudes, I think. Okay,
look, we're running out of time here now. So I just want to briefly say how much of his theories what of his thinking is most relevant for us these days, do you think?
I think the possibility of thinking in this process, in terms of his process, the process of the dialectic, thinking in terms of these various stages through which things go. So you're not putting yourself on one side or another. You're thinking about these three stages that everything can be divided into. And what this does is open up the possibilities of new ways of thinking. And so that it can be applied to almost any area of thought that you want to consider.
Okay, Katerina, what do you think he's most relevant for now?
I won't venture to speak in general, but I would say what interests me is his conception of action and the way in which he tries to get us away from thinking about the little homunculus thinking inside ourselves. And this is very interesting, very public, shared conception of action is quite fascinating and tireless with contemporary ideas.
We're actors only within a community.
Yes, I suppose so, yes.
Okay, we're coming near to the end of the show now, so I'm Grant Bartley. I want you to buy my book, so The Meta Revolution and Love, Solitude and Destruction, which you can get online. Okay, guys, do you want to tell the people what your websites are for the musicians, Rosanella?
Yes, one is Alan Stewart Music, alanstewartmusic.com. And mine is rosanellamusic.com.
Okay.
And I'll be recording, permit you say, at Tigersonic in Felix of Tigersonic, middle of February. So watch that space.
Okay, great. There'll be something available there soon. Okay, and there's also a web forum at philosophynow.org if you want to start a theme on anything that you've heard today, and you can hear the podcast there as well. Okay, bye.